On January 3rd, 2026, President Trump and his administration captured President Maduro of Venezuela. And I thought to myself, how did 10 American soldiers do that without any casualties? Now, of course, there was more backup. There's supposedly like 8 helicopters, there were drones there and things like that, but there were no casualties taken. And recently, an interesting account came from one of President Maduro's security guards. And I just want to read that to you because it's really fascinating what happened. I think it's probably both US propaganda as well as some truth to it. We'll never actually know. But what's interesting is the interviewer asked the security guard a few questions that lets us into possibly knowing that Americans are now using different types of sound technology as weapons, as well as maybe some type of new projectile weaponry that is not yet on the market or known to the average person, although I'm sure there's stuff like that, right? The US military is always 30 years ahead of what they're sharing with us. So just sit back and listen to the security guard's account of what happened when President Maduro was captured by US forces. So this interview begins with the security guard stating, "On the day of the operation, we didn't hear anything coming. We were on guard, but suddenly all our radar systems shut down without any explanation. The next thing we saw were drones, a lot of drones, flying over our positions. We didn't know how to react." Then the interviewer asks, "So what happened next? How was the main attack?" The security guard goes on to say, "After the drones appeared, some helicopters arrived, but there were very few, I think barely 8 helicopters. From those helicopters, soldiers came down, but a very small number. Maybe 20 men. But those men were technologically very advanced. They didn't look like anything we fought against before." The interviewer then says, "And then the battle began?" And the security guard says, "Yes, but it was a massacre. We were hundreds, but we had no chance. They were shooting with such precision and speed. It seemed like each soldier was firing 300 rounds per minute. We couldn't do anything." And the interviewer then asks, "And your weapons, didn't they help?" The security guard goes, "No help at all, because it wasn't just the weapons. At one point, they launched something. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, I felt like my head was exploding from the inside. We all started bleeding from the nose. Some were vomiting. We fell to the ground, unable to move." I want you to think about that. It took only 20 US soldiers to capture a section that had 100 security guards for President Maduro, and they were able to do nothing. Not one injury or loss of life to the Americans. They captured President Maduro and took him. But the interview still goes on. Let me continue. The interviewer asks, "And your comrades, did they manage to resist?" The security guard, "No, not at all. Those 20 men, without a single casualty, killed hundreds of us. We had no way to compete with that technology, with their weapons. I swear I've never seen anything like it. We couldn't even stand up after the sonic weapon or whatever it was." The interviewer asks, "So do you think the rest of the region should think twice before confronting the Americans?" The security guard, "Without a doubt. I'm sending a warning to anyone who thinks they can fight the United States. They have no idea what they're capable of. After what I saw, I never want to be on the other side of that again. They're not to be messed with." And the interviewer asks, "And now that Trump has said that Mexico is on the list, do you think the situation will change in Latin America?" The security guard finally answers, "Definitely. Everyone is already talking about this. No one wants to go through what we went through. Now everyone thinks twice. What happened here is going to change a lot of things, not just in Venezuela, but throughout the region." I want you to think about this. Like in the very beginning, it was never about like setting freedom to the region or bringing democracy. It never really is, right? I've been under the impression that it's mostly about oil. But also considering that Venezuela was supplying oil to our enemies like China, like Russia. This is another form of a message or propaganda to these countries stating, look what we can do when we want to do it and how we want to do it at no cost to us. It was 20 US soldiers that took down an entire armada made up of hundreds of security guards for President Maduro, and they could do absolutely nothing. There's a new type of war coming, one that even we should be afraid of, because if the US government uses it on foreign lands against enemies, it's just a matter of time before it uses it against us. I hope that never happens, but it always somehow does, because always, somehow, some way, the American always becomes the enemy of the state. It really became evident with what happened after 2001. The Patriot Act itself was treason against its own citizens, and today it's being used against us. It's important that we all look at what's happening around in the world so we know how we can defend ourselves in the future. Information's always important. There's always an informational war on our minds. After all, look what it's been doing to us over the last decade or last 2 decades. It's radicalized most of us, and we can't even have a conversation to create a basic balance for the foundation of this country anymore.